In Wuhan, the new coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 had taken its first life. The victim, a 61-year-old man, was one of the first cluster of cases connected to the Huanan wet market.
The question is, how does that virus manifest itself in humans?
When we're dealing with outbreaks of unknown pathogens, it's better to overreact than underreact.
Overnight, Wuhan was transformed into a ghost town. By the 23rd of January, there were 570 reported cases, 17 deaths in China, and 11 million people under quarantine in Wuhan. In spite of the lockdown, the virus had already moved beyond China's borders. The first international case was in Thailand.
Thailand has reported the first case of the Wuhan coronavirus found outside of China.
Spurred into action, scientists across the globe worked against the clock to slow the spread, with the WHO at the center of the effort.
China, they detect these unknown diseases and identify the coronavirus in a very short period, and they share all those sequences to the other countries. So we're daily receiving these informations and analyzing informations and sharing the informations to member states.
As well as the sharing of data, a vital step in checking a virus's spread comes through tracing every person an infected patient has been in contact with.
Contact tracing is identifying all persons who have had contact with a known person to be infected, either before the infection began or afterwards. And those people are isolated. They're asked to isolate, either self-isolate or sometimes they're put in quarantine, and they're monitored for a period of up to 3 weeks to see whether or not they develop signs and symptoms.
In China, the task of contact tracing was an enormous undertaking. In Wuhan alone, more than 1,800 epidemiologists were tracing tens of thousands of contacts a day. But it quickly proved its worth. Between 1% and 5% of contacts were subsequently confirmed cases of COVID-19. But there was one group of possible cases which confounded scientists.
There are some people who might be infected with a virus, and at no point do they develop any symptoms whatsoever. So they don't even feel tired or have muscle aches and pains. They are asymptomatic. And that can become quite concerning because we then don't know what the background level of viral infection is in the population.
With cases racking up, governments around the world were starting to pay close attention and begin their own outbreak preparations.
Well, airlines have begun suspending flights as fears mount over the coronavirus epidemic.
Aviation regulator DGCA has asked airports and airlines to begin screening passengers arriving from Japan and South Korea.
Containment was now a key strategy against COVID-19. To minimize the risks of importing infected individuals, countries began restricting flights from affected regions.
Countries are doing a number of things to try to protect themselves. One of them is that they're simply monitoring what is going on in China to try to get a sense of what might be working, what is not working. A second thing is that some countries have taken steps to reduce the amount of travel between China and their country, or people coming from China have been put into quarantine.
I got back from China 4 days ago. I was part of the WHO Joint China mission. So as is undertaken in Singapore and in fact lots of countries around the world, there's a 14-day home quarantine order for people that are returning from areas of high transmission. So I'm staying home, I'm doing all my usual work, but I'm doing it from my desk and my office at home.
As the global shutdown on travel grew, the reality was that scientists were not able to halt the virus. They had a different, more pragmatic objective.
We're not trying to stop this outbreak from coming. We're trying to stop it coming quickly. If it comes too quickly, then health services get overwhelmed and mortality rates increase when the health systems can't cope.
Most healthcare systems already operate at near capacity. This outbreak had the potential to overwhelm some. The scientific advice was to try to buy time.
The hospitals have a very difficult job. One, they have to take care of the patient safely, but they also have to make sure that their healthcare workers are safe. So they want to make sure that they have enough rooms to put patients in. You want to have transportation means like ambulances which are safe. And you also want to have a health system, a hospital or clinic, which can take care of patients safely.
In Wuhan, hospitals were struggling to cope with the influx of patients. Li Hua, a resident of the city, had a friend who was struck by the virus, but she wasn't receiving any medical treatment.
So at the very beginning, I think when she had the symptoms, she went to the hospital and the doctor diagnosed her with the disease, but wasn't able to take her into the hospital because they're very limited to the amount of doctors and beds they have in the hospital. So they actually sent her home to be quarantined. But I think this is a special situation where you just have limited resource, right?
With the world's eyes on Wuhan, the Chinese authorities were spurred into even greater action. In an unprecedented effort, authorities built and repurposed an extra 16 hospitals in a matter of weeks. It was thanks to these efforts that patients such as Li Hua's friend were finally able to receive medical treatment.
It took about a week since she was admitted to the hospital. She told me she's been getting better since then.
Beyond China's borders, another country with a vast population was also bracing for the outbreak. India, home to more than 1 billion people, second only to China in its number of citizens.
In the middle of December, when we first heard about the unusual pneumonia that was happening in China, I called together our team of scientists and I told them, we must have a preparedness team.
A month into the outbreak, India confirmed its first case of COVID-19. Priya and her team were taking no chances.
We were the first to initiate testing for the whole country. The first 3 positives were detected here.
At Priya's lab, another possible case sample arrived for testing. Known as a PCR test, a sample, such as a throat swab, is taken from the patient. The test scans through the genetic material in the sample and searches for the presence of telltale coronavirus RNA, taking just hours to detect whether the sample is positive or negative.
Thus far, it's mainly been molecular detection of this virus, but there are already a couple of candidate antibody detection products by which you could detect the antibody response to this virus. And I believe that with time, you could screen a population.
An antibody approach could allow for better tracking and surveillance of an outbreak in a population. But in the meantime, many scientists are reliant on the PCR test. The sample in Priya's lab came back positive. Just one more step in the virus's seemingly unstoppable global spread.
The hugely exponential manner in which it has spread, there is now a sense of alarm.
By early February, the total number of the confirmed cases had grown to over 31,000 across the world, including 638 fatalities. And alarmingly, even seemingly healthy adults could be struck down, including one of the doctors who first spotted the outbreak in Wuhan. The emerging profile from COVID-19 is that the disease is most dangerous to certain subgroups of the population.
The vast majority of people who have died have been over the age of 60, but we do also see that there are a small number of people who are thought to be relatively fit and healthy and in their 30s who have also died from the virus. And it's unclear why that is the case.
But with little time available to study COVID-19, there were still many questions scientists were grappling with. For instance, are children somehow less vulnerable to the virus? In China, children aged 9 and under only made up just 1% of the total number of infections. Whether this is an accurate picture, or if, for example, infection in children is frequently too mild to be detected, remains to be seen. Despite the many challenges faced, there's one aspect of COVID-19 that's providing some hope to scientists: the high survival rate among the infected.
Coronavirus seems to be one that spreads very easily, but as it seems at the moment, its mortality is relatively low. 2% is the current figure. It may even be lower because we do not take account of all the people that are infected but don't have disease. Okay? We're measuring usually only the number of people that are diseased. There would be a lot more people, possibly, that are infected.
One approach to tackling the novel coronavirus involved the concept of herd immunity. If enough people were to be exposed to the virus and then go on to develop immunity, a natural firebreak in transmission would occur. But how many cases would be needed, and at what cost? And crucially, it assumes that people cannot get the disease more than once, which is as yet unknown. Given the pace at which the virus was spreading, this was a theory at risk of becoming a reality.
If everyone keeps infecting, say, 3 people and every 4 days there's another generation, you can see how within a month you can have thousands of cases.
The prospect of herd immunity, however, has several drawbacks. Hospitals will have to cope with a massive influx of patients, overwhelming already strained medical resources, and the question of whether widespread natural immunity would actually emerge remains unknown. The virus may itself evolve quickly, sidestepping any immunity we do develop. This has been the case for one of the most persistent yet elusive viral infections we have all battled with, the common cold. How our collective immune systems respond to the new coronavirus over time remains one of the great unknowns.
Humans have no immunity to this virus because they've never been exposed to it before. So when a new virus like COVID-19 enters human populations, everybody is at risk. That's one difference. Influenza, there's a background of immunity which somehow tempers the infection so that it's not so vicious as a new virus that enters human populations for the first time.
The risks of collective inaction against such an emerging virus are staggering. Research from Imperial College in London underscores the scale of devastation the virus and its disease would wreak on the global population if the outbreak was simply let to run its course. The researchers estimate that a jaw-dropping 7 billion people would become infected, and some 40 million would die from the disease if there was no intervention. By taking drastic action, however, and reducing social contact, of course those numbers can be hugely scaled down.
I don't think any of us can accept death from any virus. So we need to develop other tools for other diseases, such as coronavirus, because these are common viruses. And if they continue to emerge, we need a vaccine.
As new, untested and theoretical options were being considered, there was now only one concrete way of containing the spread of COVID-19, and that was by means of aggressive testing, tracing and suppression, keeping the sickest in hospitals for treatment, and ensuring the general population is kept isolated to prevent further transmission. A combination of these tactics has the potential to save tens of millions of lives, all while racing against time to find a vaccine.